After 2 weeks of living indoors, I'm ready to climb the walls. Indoors, I can't hear any bird twittering. Don't feel the wind on the back of my neck. Can't see the stars. Smell the grass. Listen to any of the outdoor noises I feel comfortable with.
When you're driving a Volkswagen van, especially in the 70s, you had an awful lot of hitchhikers. They're young people going back and forth between Haight-Ashbury and New Jersey, looking for the heart of America. And I just passed a bunch in Elko because I really didn't want any company, and they all had their thumbs up and were waving different hand signals as I passed them. I had gone down the road a little ways and I saw a little stubby man in the shrubbery, and I was going fast. It took me a while to process what it was, and I realized it was a guy with no feet. He was just cut off at the knees. So I turned around and went back and picked him up. And it was Stanley Gurcze. Turned out to be the ultimate hitchhiker. He'd been on the road for 15 years, just no particular destination in mind, lacking the basic equipment of a vagabond. He didn't have any feet, but he was a great talker, a great philosopher. Really one of the highlights.
I enjoy being all by myself out in the middle of nowhere, because I've been a loner all my life anyway. I'm on the road 49 weeks a year. Maybe 5 or 6 times in the year, I can get lucky and get a motel room for the night, where I can take a bath and wash my clothes. Of course, they're never dry in the morning, so I gotta put them on damp, and then I try to dry them as I walk along the highway.
So Stan told me his story as we went along. He said he was looking for an honest man, and he was also hoping that one day he would get a ride in a Chrysler. And one of the great mysteries of life for Stanley was, why don't Chryslers pick up hitchhikers? He'd ridden in a Rolls Royce, he'd ridden with every type of conveyance except a Chrysler. So that's just a nugget of wisdom you pick up in your travels. If you're ever out here hitchhiking, you see a Chrysler product coming, don't bother. Stanley was a rider like myself, keeping a careful account of his adventures on the road. He had a manuscript titled The Short Hitchhiker, which I am now in possession of. A pretty good read. I'm always amazed how many destitute people have literary ambitions. I thought I was the only one, but evidently that's, when you're down to just nothing, if you have a pencil and paper, you can always start writing a book.
I continued on my way until dark, found a camping spot for myself, and spent the night in the peace and quiet of the desert. I went to sleep hearing the beautiful, mournful howl of a wolf off in the distance somewhere, and another answering the call from another direction. It's too bad people who travel this part of our country don't slow down and look at all the beauty surrounding them in every direction. The flowers, the mountains, the plants and animals, the colors in a sunset, the brightness of the stars in the heavens. Then perhaps their own so-called insurmountable problems would lessen just a little, and they would thank the good Lord for all the blessings they do have.
Well, Stanley told me that, like I say, I've been picked up by then Governor of Nevada, Paul Laxalt, and I regret that I haven't checked this out with Mr. Laxalt. So I hope it's true. But Paul was actually in a chauffeur-driven limousine at the time, and they stopped and picked Stan up.
As I got settled in the back seat, I realized that this was not a highway patrol car. That blame thing was a Lincoln Continental painted the same as a highway patrol car. The gentleman got back in the front seat, turned to me with his hand outstretched, and said, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Laxalt. I'm the governor of this state. I shook his hand. I was speechless, which doesn't happen very often. He continued, what is your destination?
And Governor Laxalt had business in Carson City, so he asked his driver to take Stan to a store and buy him a six-pack of beer and then take him anywhere he wanted to go. So Stan was in heaven. You know, here's a guy who spent most of his time out here in this godforsaken desert. And suddenly he's in a chauffeured limousine with his own six-pack and going anywhere he wants to go. But what the governor didn't realize is Stan really didn't have a destination. He hadn't been trying to get to any place. So they headed off toward Las Vegas. And Stan was chugging beer at the taxpayers' expense and enjoying the air-conditioned ride until his guilt overtook him. And there wasn't any place there but just desert like we have here. So Stan, conscience-stricken, asked the driver to let him out. The driver said, is sure this is where you're going? He said, this is where I'm going. So Stan retreated to the shade of a sagebrush, and the limo turned around and went back to Carson City. And Stan was back in his element out in the shrubbery with his backpack and his book and his six-pack. Doesn't get any better than that, really.
Funding for this program was provided in part by the John Ben Snow Memorial Trust and by Meridian Gold.